3 days ago, I hit Master Tier on my jungle account. This was really big to me for multiple reasons. One, obviously, just hitting Master Tier is cool on anything, but being able to do it on a different role, so now I've hit Master on two different roles, as well as while playing two champions, was really great for me because I'd always struggled with being a one trick in top lane with Garen. That's all I could ever even hit Diamond on, much less Master. But I did manage to get Master a couple times with Garen. It's just I wouldn't stay very long. This time though, however, with jungle, I managed to do it while playing Warwick and Zac. So I was really happy about that. And I'll go into later why that's so great for me and why I think I had more success with jungle doing it. But before I even get into that, what I do want to cover is that by the time I actually got around to recording this video, I've already demoted back to Diamond 1, but that's okay. It's not that big of a deal because I know that I can get back there if I just stick to doing what I was supposed to be continuing to do on my way up, because all that matters is that I'm consistently playing well. If I lose like a few games and then drop, it's whatever, I'll get back there. But if I'm losing a bunch of games because I'm playing poorly, then that's a completely different thing that I need to fix, which was the case recently. So it's completely valid that I demoted. I just was not playing well enough. However, if I do fix my gameplay and manage to do it consistently, then getting back to Master is just like a minimum. It should continue to go upwards as long as I continue to improve and really fix my weak points as well as improve on my strong points. When it comes to breaking away from being a one trick, something that I didn't grasp when I was playing top lane and trying to learn another champ was the concept of champion mastery. And I don't mean like the mastery level 7, I don't mean that kind of champion mastery, but the ability to understand what your champion wants in a game, as well as just generally how do you play out fights. It's really, really important, and I didn't know this 2-3 years ago when I was trying to play Camille and pick her up, or Renekton, Shen, whatever champion was at the time. Because I was so focused on the concept of fundamentals, which, don't get me wrong, fundamentals are important, but it's very overrated in the League scene because it's secondary to champion mastery, and a lot of people like skip over that. You'll see it all the time where like streamers, YouTubers, whatever, there'll be a high-low one trick of one champion, and then they pretend like they're the same skill level on another champion while completely butchering the basics of the character. Every champion, their perception of fundamentals or the way that they use fundamentals is going to be slightly warped or distorted towards however they achieve their goals. For example, you're playing something like Zac in my case, your ganks are very different from other champions that don't have a dash, like something like a Warwick, an Udyr. You're not going to gank the same way. Now, yes, you are still using the fundamental of ganking, but it's completely different in the angle that you take it. If you try to play them the same way, and you both try to go through river, it's not going to work nearly as well on one versus the other. Same thing if you try to go around playing Udyr like you would hop over a wall with Zac, it's not going to work. The point that I'm trying to get at is whenever I was playing other champions in top lane, I would try to play them the same. Like, for example, Garen does not do nearly as well with a freeze compared to another champion like Darius or Tryndamere that can run people down better. Not to say that you shouldn't freeze as Garen, but the value that you gain from different fundamentals changes depending on your champion. And if you try to pretend, or not even pretend, but like if you genuinely believe that the value is the same for each champion, you're going to really struggle, which is how it was for me. And whenever someday in the future I do eventually go and try to learn another champion top lane, I'm pretty confident that I'll have a much better idea on how to do it now that I've done it with jungle. Although I will admit that it's definitely easier to pick up another champion in jungle compared to in lane, because in jungle you don't have to worry about learning matchups. they're not nearly as important as in lane. A lot of the time, the main thing that you need to know is, can they invade you realistically? Can you invade them at certain timings? Although you don't really have to invade that much as jungle. It just kind of depends on the champ you're playing. But the point that I'm getting at is there are ways to avoid the opponent, and you can't realistically do that in lane. You have to know very deeply how to trade, how your champions interact. There's so many different combinations of lane matchups that you can have. Going back to my demotion, I actually had a bigger demotion not too long ago. For a while, and even at the end of last splits, I was Diamond 2. This split, I was mostly chilling at D3 for a good while. Then I demoted all the way to Emerald 2 and was stuck there for weeks. The reason that I was stuck in Emerald for a few weeks is because I was still hanging on to my previous rank that I typically was playing in, but I no longer was. And so I continued to consider myself a diamond level jungler, even though I wasn't. I may have been diamond in top lane at the time, but that doesn't make me a diamond level jungler. So what I had to do in order to get out of that process of being stuck and making the same mistakes over and over again is I had to admit to myself that I was in fact Emerald, accept the rank that I was at. Once I did that and started to then do exactly what I would want an Emerald student to do, I started climbing. Crazy how that works. I was playing so much better, and in turn, my rank went up. Because during the time of being Emerald, especially at the start of it, I was definitely faking my process of improvement. And I've done that many times in life. Sometimes when I was doing it, I wasn't as conscious of what I was actually doing. Because what can happen is many people can pretend like they're really trying to improve, but then when you actually look at what they're doing, it's not really the case. For example, I used to do this a lot. I would just spam out like 15 games a day. Sometimes literally, sometimes more like 10, but you get the idea. Playing a lot of games. And I would convince myself that I was trying my hardest because I was playing more. In a way, I was like working out my mechanics more. But if the games are low quality, if I'm not actually actively playing really well, like focusing very intently on what I want to do in the game, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many games you play. You're not going to actually get better, which is what I was doing. But even when you lower down the games, that's not enough. Just because I play 3 games a day or 6 games a day, still doesn't mean that I'm more focused. I still have to actively try really, really hard to play better, to maintain my mental, which is a really important aspect that I'll get to later. Just all around not going through the motions, because it's very, very easy to go through the motions in anything in life, but especially League. It's so easy to do it. Because you could end up just not looking in the minimap and dying, or it's a very common tendency, regardless of the champion you're playing. For example, if you're playing a scaling champion, you may fight less than you should be just because you know that you'll scale even though it's not correct. You're missing out on opportunities. Or it could be the opposite. You could be an early game champion, but you're fighting way too much because you have this narrative that you're completely useless later in the game instead of focusing on what plays are actually good versus just flipping everything. Another part of faking this process is the people that don't review their games, or even the ones that do review their games that don't actually review them. Because it's really easy to fake a review. If you go in to a review and you know that you did really stupid deaths, but you don't actually learn from it at all, and you continue to keep doing it anyway, what's the point in the review? So now my metric of determining what is a successful use of my time, or at least not a waste of my time, is whenever I learn something from a game. So that's why every single game I make sure that I learn at least something. Even if it's like a 4v5, 3v5, I don't care. There's always something you can learn from the game, even if it's really minor. Just something to take away so that you can get your mind out of the only time that I've had a good use of my time is if I got LP. That's just, it's a really short-term way to think, and it ends up causing so many problems that I didn't realize until I really got my head around it. When it comes to learning something from every game, I had a spreadsheet that I still use to this day, and all that it consists of is champion I played, who I played against, just to kind of keep track of what the game was. Did I play well, which is the most important metric, and also did I maintain a good mental. For me, I use a very strict requirement of that. If at any point I mentally or audibly, doesn't matter, I don't type, but if at any point I start thinking that like I want to blame a teammate, or I do blame a teammate for something, then I mark that as a no, because I should only be focusing on what I'm doing, not my teammates. Or if I start like tilting because a teammate's really behind or getting frustrated, that's also a no, because what I've realized through using this process is that it doesn't actually matter if your teammate's behind, if all your focus is playing well. And once you really get that in your head, it's so mentally freeing, because I don't care. Like if my bot lane gets double killed 3 minutes in before I can gank, it doesn't matter. It may make it to where I can't get LP later in that game, but I can still meet both of my metrics of playing well and maintaining good mental. So in the long run, as long as I'm consistently hitting yes on both of those, I'll climb. And me hitting master was proof of that to me. It definitely works. There's no question in my mind. And funnily enough, because I stopped caring about my teammates getting double killed in that particular instance, I often end up winning those games, because I've gotten out of my head of thinking, oh my god, this game's going to be so difficult because they both died. Instead, I'm just focused on, regardless, what is my next play? Since they're dead, maybe I need to give up this crab, go to the other crab, or even skip both if I just realistically can't do it, and just go back to the beginning of my clear. Whatever I need to do, but just focus on what actually matters. And another great thing about this spreadsheet, that it keeps me accountable for what actually happened. So if I start thinking that I had a really good set of games, I go in a review and I realize, no, I didn't, and I mark a bunch of no's, over time, I can start to see if I'm stagnating in rank, it doesn't make sense. And one of two things is going to happen. Either A, it's going to make sense, and you're going to see a bunch of no's on your spreadsheet that you didn't play well, or you're not doing it in good faith. Because if you're genuinely putting that you played well in a large majority of your games, and you're still stuck in the same rank, then you're not being honest with yourself. Because that's not possible for you to be playing really well most of your games and not climb. In the long term, over the course of like 10 games, maybe. But it's not going to happen over 50, 100 games, etc. Especially because you should be updating what you consider to be playing well as you climb. For example, the requirements for a bronze player to play really well for his skill bracket is going to be very different from me in my own games. I try to be very strict with what I consider to be a good game. If I do something really stupid that makes the game really hard, but then I turned around later in the game, usually I'm still going to mark it as a no, because I have to be honest with myself, I probably shouldn't have won that game because of the mistakes that I made earlier, and I just got lucky. It also helps to really focus on cleaning up the early game, because that's what matters the most, since you have the most control over that part of the game. As I said, when it comes to the things that I learn from the games, this is, you can probably see it, the list of different things that I've taken away from the game. Sometimes it's really small, like learning that a certain champion can cancel my E as Zac, or maybe learning that Baron is tankier because of a patch they did recently. It may seem like a small detail, but it's actually really big, because it can change a lot on whether I should go for a Baron or not. But these notes aren't all that I have, though. I also have my individual notes that I put on my games in a playlist on my channel that show exactly what I think I did particularly wrong in that game, as well as the last note being my typical end of review. End of review meaning a very substantial mistake that completely changes how the game should have played out. And so it's unreasonable or unrealistic to try to continue reviewing through that game knowing that everything is completely different from how it should have been. The last thing that I want to talk about in this video is that in the course of climbing, I realized that fixing my mental was so much more important than the actual in-game knowledge. Now, don't get me wrong, learning more about what to do in-game is super important. Not saying it isn't. But if you're not using the information that you learn, it doesn't matter what you learn outside of game. You have to be able to mentally stay cool and actually use the information that you're trying to work on. Because it's really easy to either intentionally or unintentionally mentally check out of a game. Even though you may think, oh, I'm still playing okay, but you know that you could have been actively really trying to look for things in the game, but you weren't because you got lazy or frustrated. And it's a way to kind of cope with losing the game instead of really trying to squeeze out every little piece of information that you can from the game so that you can play better in the next game. If anyone happens to still be listening to this video, I really appreciate it. This video isn't made for like most people. It's just primarily for me and maybe the few people that it really hits home with and actually helps to like fix some of their issues with their mentality, or at least become more aware of the way they see the game so that they don't feel like every time they lose it's just a complete waste of time, which is such a terrible mindset to have, and it's really hard to break out of. But believe me, it's worth it if you do.